I've lived near Angeles National Forest most of my adult life. If you grow up around it long enough, the forest stops feeling like wilderness and starts feeling familiar, almost comforting. I knew those trails better than some city streets. Every bend, every elevation change, every place where the dirt turned loose under your boots. That night, I wasn't hiking for adventure. I was hiking because staying inside my apartment felt unbearable. Earlier that afternoon, I'd gotten a phone call that split something open inside me. The kind of news that doesn't scream. It just sits there, heavy, pressing against your chest. I remember standing in my kitchen after the call ended, staring at the wall, feeling like the air itself had thickened. Some people drink. Some people call someone they trust. I grabbed my keys and my pack. By the time I parked at the trailhead, it was a little after 8 p.m. The sun was long gone, and the mountains were already swallowing what little light remained. Night hikes weren't unusual for me, especially on trails I'd walked dozens of times before. There was usually something calming about it. The quiet, the cool air, the feeling of being temporarily untethered from everything. That night felt different the moment I stepped past the trailhead sign. The fog was already rolling in. The deeper I went, the thicker the fog became. At first, it was just low and wispy, curling around the trees like smoke. But within 20 minutes, it had turned into something else entirely. Heavy, suffocating, like the forest was holding its breath. Visibility dropped fast. 20 feet, maybe less. I tried using my flashlight, but the beam didn't cut through the fog. It bounced straight back at me, turning the air into a blinding white wall. Reminded me of driving through a snowstorm with high beams on, worse than useless. So I turned it off. I let my eyes adjust, and relied on the faint ambient glow filtering through the canopy. I put my earbuds in and played music softly, an old habit I'd picked up from my dad. Noise keeps animals away, he used to say. The forest around me felt muted, like it was wrapped in cotton. No wind, no insects, no distant animal calls, just my footsteps and fog. About an hour into the hike, something stopped me mid-step. A smell. At first I thought I imagined it. I stood there, motionless, letting the fog swirl past my face. It wasn't the smell of wet dirt or pine needles or decaying leaves, the usual forest scents. This was floral, light, clean, almost sweet. Perfume. I actually laughed under my breath because it made no sense. No one wears perfume deep in a national forest at night. I slowly turned in a full circle, scanning the fog even though I knew it was pointless. By the time I completed the turn, the smell was gone. Vanished, like it had never been there at all. I shrugged it off and kept walking, telling myself it was probably something natural I couldn't identify. 10 minutes later, another smell drifted in. Campfire smoke. That one made more sense. Someone must have been camping somewhere nearby, I thought. Maybe the perfume smell came from them too. But the smoke scent lingered for only half a minute before fading just as abruptly. That's when unease started creeping in. The third smell arrived without warning. Earthy. Herbal. Familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. It reminded me of something from my childhood, but I couldn't place it, like a memory without an image. That was the moment I should have turned back. I didn't. Things stayed quiet for a while after that. Too quiet. I started to relax again, convincing myself I'd let my imagination get ahead of me. That's when I noticed the light. A flashlight beam. It flickered on along a ridge to my left, about 100 feet higher than the main trail. That ridge runs parallel to the path, steep and inaccessible. There are no marked trails up there. I knew that for a fact. The beam swept across the ridge, then clicked off. A few seconds later, it turned on again, in a completely different spot. My music suddenly felt like a mistake. I pulled out my earbuds and killed the sound. That's when I heard the whistling. Slow, casual, almost cheerful. Whoever was up there had definitely heard my music earlier, and now they were close enough for me to hear them clearly. My skin crawled. By then, I was several miles in. Turning back felt harder than continuing. There was a small overlook ahead, a flat rock near a steep drop-off. I told myself I'd stop there, take a breather, and decide what to do. The moment I stepped into the clearing, my blood ran cold. On the flat stone near the edge sat a small sculpture made of stacked rocks. Not random, intentional, balanced carefully. I didn't stop to analyze it. I didn't take a closer look. I turned around and walked back the way I came. Fast. I hadn't gone far when I heard them. Rapid footsteps. Heavy. Human. They were coming straight toward me from the direction I needed to go. There was no time to think, no time to run. The sound closed the distance in seconds. I froze, bracing myself for a collision, for an attack. And then, nothing. The footsteps stopped dead. Silence swallowed the forest again. I stared into the fog, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. If someone was standing there, they were invisible. And yet, they had known exactly where I was. I pulled out the switchblade I always carried. I waited. Nothing happened. The problem became obvious fast. The footsteps had come from the direction of the trailhead. If I wanted to leave, I had to walk toward whoever had charged me. There was no alternate route, no shortcut. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the silence stretch thin. Eventually, fear of staying outweighed fear of moving. So I walked. Every step felt wrong. Every sound felt amplified. I kept imagining someone matching my pace just out of sight. Sometimes, I swear I heard extra footsteps, not ahead, behind me. A mile later, something exploded through the bushes behind me. Branches snapping, leaves tearing. I yelled without meaning to. When I turned, there was nothing but fog. Again. That was the moment certainty hit me. I was not alone. I ran. The sound followed immediately. Crashing, heavy, fast. Whatever it was didn't care about stealth anymore. It was coming straight at me. I didn't look back again. I don't remember the trail clearly after that. Just flashes, roots, rocks, my lungs burning, the sound of pursuit never falling behind. When the parking lot finally appeared through the fog, it felt unreal, like stepping into another world. The crashing stopped the moment I reached my car. I drove away shaking. I didn't hike again for months. Even now, years later, certain smells make my stomach drop. Perfume, smoke, wet earth after fog. I never found out what chased me. But I know one thing for sure. That forest knew I was there. And for one night, it didn't want me to leave. I always believed that freedom had an address. For me, it wasn't a dream car or a high-paying job. It was my own front door. Growing up in a small town in the northeastern United States, home never felt safe. My father drank heavily on weekends, and when he drank, the house felt smaller, louder, meaner. My mother wasn't cruel, but she was distant, emotionally checked out, like someone counting down days instead of living them. Arguments were normal. Silence afterward was worse. By the time I hit high school, I was already planning my escape. Not running away, moving out. I told myself that once I had my own place, everything would be different. No shouting through walls, no drunken footsteps at midnight, no pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And once college started and dating became a thing, the pressure doubled. There was no way I was bringing anyone back to that house. So the moment I turned 19 and enrolled in a local commuter college, not because I wanted to stay home, but because my parents refused to pay for housing elsewhere, I started looking. Every night I scrolled through Zillow, Facebook Marketplace, and Craigslist like my life depended on it. Then one listing changed everything. The apartment was older, tucked behind a row of maple trees near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a single-floor unit in a low brick building. But it was affordable, and more importantly, it was mine. When I stepped inside for the first time, I mentally mapped everything out. You walked straight into an open living and dining area, one wide rectangular space with beige carpet and slightly yellowed walls. The kitchen sat just off to the side, separated by a half wall, old cabinets, faint smell of cleaning chemicals, and something metallic. A narrow hallway led away from the living room. 2 closets lined the hall, one shallow, one deep. Then the bathroom door. And finally, at the end of the hallway, the bedroom. The bedroom sold me. It was bigger than I expected. A queen-sized bed fit comfortably. 2 more closets along the wall. Enough room for dressers, a TV, even a small desk. It wasn't luxury, but it felt like freedom. I signed the lease without hesitation. The first few months were peaceful. I worked part-time, went to classes, and spent nights doing the things I couldn't do at home. Watching movies loudly, cooking at 2 a.m., inviting friends over without anxiety sitting in my chest. For the first time in my life, I slept deeply. That night started like any other. A group of us went out downtown. A few bars, cheap drinks, loud music. Nothing wild. Near closing time, I ran into a girl I recognized from school. We'd talked before, but never hung out one-on-one. I'll call her Jordan. We ended up back at my apartment laughing, tipsy, comfortable. We put on a movie in the living room, then eventually moved to the bedroom to finish it. Nothing dramatic happened. No pressure. Just exhaustion. At some point, the movie kept playing, and we passed out. I woke up to the sound of movement. Soft footsteps. Slow. Careful. My eyes opened instantly. It was still dark. The faint orange glow from a street light leaked through the blinds. I rolled over. The bed beside me was empty. My heart kicked up. I sat up and looked toward the hallway. That's when I saw Jordan in the living room, quietly grabbing her jacket off the couch. She moved like she was trying not to wake me. It made sense. Some people hate the awkward morning after. I didn't say anything. I waited. Listened as the front door opened, then eventually closed. For good measure, I called out her name once. No response. I lay back down, still a little drunk, still tired, and fell asleep again within minutes. That should have been the end of it. About an hour later, I woke up again, this time to a loud sound, like something shifting or brushing against the wall. I sat straight up in bed. My heart started racing instantly. I called out Jordan's name again, even though I already knew she was gone. Silence. The bedroom door was still open. I hadn't bothered closing it earlier. That's when I noticed something unnatural. At first, I thought it was my vision. Alcohol, sleep, darkness mixing together. But it looked like something was wrapped around the door frame, I froze. My breathing got shallow, fast. I didn't move. I don't know how I found the courage. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. I swiped down and tapped the flashlight icon. The beam hit the doorframe, and that's when my brain stopped trying to rationalize. There were two hands, wrapped tightly around the doorframe, fingers curled, knuckles pale, grip firm. As soon as the light hit them, they tightened, then pulled back out of sight. Fast, deliberate. The scream ripped out of me before I could stop it. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" I screamed until my throat burned. I jumped out of bed and flipped on the hallway light. Nothing. The hallway stood empty. I checked the closets, the bathroom, every corner, then the living room, then the kitchen. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. But something didn't make sense. I never heard the front door close. And yet, I was alone. I locked the door immediately. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called Jordan. She sounded half asleep. She left hours ago. Then I called my best friend. He laughed, gently, and told me I was drunk, sleep-deprived, and probably hallucinated. It made sense. I wanted it to make sense. Eventually, I locked my bedroom door and fell asleep again. The next morning, I checked the apartment again. Clear. But something nagged at me. I went back to the bedroom door, and there it was. Fingerprints. Clear. Smudged. Exactly where the hands had been. My stomach dropped. That's when I knew. I wasn't alone that night. I called my dad. He blamed me for not locking the door. He wasn't wrong. But that didn't explain why someone stood silently in my hallway, watching. I finished my lease, moved, and never slept with my door unlocked again. I'm not writing this for attention. I'm writing this because after what happened last week, I don't think silence is safe anymore. I'm 22 years old, recently graduated, born and raised in the United States. My family has lived in the same house for as long as I can remember. A 3-story home in what most people would describe as a perfect suburban neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, identical mailboxes. The kind of place real estate agents use as background photos. Our house sits on a slight incline. From the street, you can see 2 windows clearly at night. One belongs to my bedroom on the 2nd floor. The other belongs to my dad's home office on the 3rd. Those 2 windows matter more than I ever realized. Growing up, I always felt watched, not in a dramatic way, just a quiet, background feeling. Like when you walk into a room and know someone was just there. For years, I told myself it was imagination. I was wrong. The first incident happened over a decade ago. I was still in middle school. It was a weekend morning. I was walking downstairs for breakfast when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. My dad's voice was low, tense, the kind of tone adults use when they don't want kids listening. He said, "Something happened again." Again. They brushed me off when I asked, but a few days later, my older brother told me the truth. My dad is an attorney. When deadlines pile up, he works late into the night in his 3rd floor office. That night, he'd been at his desk around midnight when something outside caught his eye. A large black SUV. It was creeping down our street, not driving, crawling. 5 miles per hour at most. No headlights, no radio noise, just rolling. Then it passed our house. A few minutes later, it came back. Same speed, opposite direction. And then it stopped, right across from our house. My dad watched from the window for several minutes. No doors opened, no interior lights, nothing. just a parked vehicle idling in total silence. He kept glancing at it for hours while working. At some point around 2 a.m., exhaustion won. He fell asleep at his desk. When he woke up at 5:30 a.m., the SUV was still there. Same position, same angle. Like it hadn't moved an inch. It drove away just before sunrise. No license plate recorded. No footage. No explanation. And my dad later admitted this wasn't the first time he'd seen vehicles pacing the street at night. Just the first time one stayed. Years passed. Nothing happened. Until I was 15. I was a sophomore in high school, staying up late in my room making music. My desk sat directly in front of my window, facing the street. That night, something flickered outside. A quick flash of light. Then another. I looked up and froze. 3 cars were moving slowly down the street, almost in formation. And from inside them, flashlights were being swept across houses. Not headlights, handheld beams. They scanned each yard deliberately, methodically. When the beam reached my neighbor's house, I felt my chest tighten. When it reached ours, I dropped to the floor. Seconds later, the flashlight beam lit up my ceiling. Someone was shining directly into my bedroom. I stayed frozen, barely breathing. After 20 seconds, I looked again. The cars were gone. The next morning, my parents believed me. They installed cameras, motion lights, a doorbell cam. We told ourselves it was criminals casing houses. But deep down, I knew. They weren't looking for empty homes. They were looking for us. 2 years later, a contractor found something while landscaping our backyard. A hidden camera. Tiny. No bigger than a car key. Tucked deep inside a bush near the fence line. The battery was dead. No memory card. No SIM. Meaning it wasn't recording. It was streaming. Someone had been close enough to watch our backyard live. And when the battery died, they never came back for it. That part still chills me the most. A few years later, our next-door neighbors moved out. The house was sold almost immediately. A young couple moved in. No kids. Big house. They kept their third-floor lights on late at night. I noticed them standing at their top window, looking into our yard. Always standing. Never sitting. Always watching. I told myself I was paranoid, until the night I saw the man in their kitchen. Bald. Muscular. Thick eyebrows. He didn't look like family. And when I noticed them, the woman silently closed the curtains, without looking outside, like she already knew I was there. After that, life went on. College, jobs, normalcy. But the feeling never left. Every time a car slowed near our house, my heart raced. Every unfamiliar face lingered too long. It felt like waiting for something you couldn't see. Something patient. Last week, my family traveled to Paris. Everything felt fine, until I saw him, sitting alone at a bar. Same build, same face, watching the room. When our eyes met, something passed between us. Recognition. He left without paying. Days later, I saw him again, taking photos. Of us. That was when my parents believed me completely. The trip felt wrong after that. Like we weren't tourists anymore. We were targets. When we returned home, nothing looked disturbed. No broken locks. No footage. But the feeling was worse. Because now I knew. Distance didn't matter. I don't know who they are. I don't know why they started. But I know this. They didn't stop. They never left the street. And now that I've noticed them, I don't think they care anymore.